today I am so honored, and I got to tell you, I just met this individual about 2 weeks ago, and I'm so glad that I did. I'm fascinated by Chris Maxwell. And so today, Chris, I'm so glad that you're able to join us. So thank you for joining me in my podcast.
Excited to be here. Thanks for having me. Great to meet you a couple weeks ago.
And so it was such an interesting meeting. I have to tell a little bit of how it got started. So the first podcast that I did with this series was with Chad Harlander, and I hadn't talked to Chad for some time, several years. And within probably 10 minutes of the conversation, when I asked him to join me on this podcast and help me kick it off, he said, "Do you know Chris Maxwell?" I said, "No, I don't know Chris Maxwell." And he said, I'll send you his information. So he sends me an email that he and Chris had communicated with. And Chris was also interested in doing a podcast with Chad and Chad Greenway and the foundation.
Yeah.
And so the next time I talked to Chad, he says, "Hey, did you connect with Chris Maxwell?" When someone tells me to connect with somebody once, I may or may not, because I thought, was it just in passing?
Yeah.
When they mention the name twice, I'm like, there's something there.
Universe is telling you.
Yeah. So for whatever reason, I waited for a few more weeks. And then one day I said, you know what? I got to reach out to this Chris Maxwell. I'm so glad that I did. And I got to tell you, it was so funny. The first 5 minutes, we started connecting the dots. So many people, especially like you know half the town of Beersford, I would say.
Yeah. I'm lucky to know half the town of Beersford.
Yeah. Well, one more. You know one more from Beersford.
Yep. Expanding.
And some outstanding people from Beersford, by the way. Some people that I consider a friend, have known in the past and know today. And just the whole life of Chris. And I got to tell you, it took about 5 minutes when we had our first conversation. And I'm like, this guy is like a TV, radio, broadcasting personality. He's just one of those things you just naturally attracted to him. And he's got the voice and the look and the whole bit. So
well, I hope I can live up to all of that, Jeff.
Well, I think you will. I'm pretty sure you will. I don't think I oversold it. I can tell you that.
No. Well, and I'll take the recommendation from Chad Harlander. What an amazing individual, and what amazing work he's doing, and what he's just doing with his life in general, and the nonprofit work and the work in the schools he's doing. Just tremendous.
It is. And so this is really ties in with that on what you do. And so before we jump into your company, tell the audience where are you from originally and where do you live today?
Yeah, so grew up in Parkston, South Dakota, so about 20-30 minutes south of Mitchell, and one of six kids. Amazing, idyllic childhood growing up there. Amazing parents. Just the example and the modeling they did for me as far as becoming the best human I could become. Just couldn't ask for more, and terrific siblings. All doing great things in their lives, in their own rights, and a couple of them still there in Parkston with my mom there as well. And so grew up there. I went to college in South Dakota, University of South Dakota, and Mount Marty University now, Mount Marty College at the time, and went off and adventured a little bit. Ended up in Omaha for a while, back to Sioux Falls, and was up in the Twin Cities for a while, and then moved back. Currently live in Fort Pierre, and I'm married to the amazing Molly Wisegram, where it'll be our 20th anniversary this summer, and we have four amazing kids. Oldest is going to be an 8th grader, so he's in middle school, and then we've got our second one joining middle school here soon, and then a couple elementary schools. Youngest is going to be a kindergartner. So 3 boys and a girl. Ben, Sam, Isaac, and Hannah. Just amazing part of my life. So and been here in the Fort Pierre area about the last 12-13 years.
So anniversary's coming up. What date?
It is. You trying to test me? July 10th. Don't work on me on dates. Between 4 kids, I'm getting bad at remembering my own birthday. So I'm glad I could pull that one out.
Yeah, you can call me a jackass after this podcast is over. Anytime I put somebody on the spot on anniversary date, a man always locks up and says, "Oh my gosh, I got to remember this date."
I'll watch my language on here, but catch you later.
Well, good enough. So I have to, so let's talk about your business. You're
Yeah.
the founder, you're the CEO of Max Strat. You've been involved on a lot of boards, involved with the state. And the one thing that I've noticed is they're connected with the ag community. Or did you grow up on a farm, or what's your connection with ag?
No, a couple things connected. Like, I did not grow up on a farm. I always tell people my grandparents were the generation for both sides of my family that ended up moving off the farm to jobs in town. But I grew up in Parkston, and obviously a really strong ag community. My mom ran a preschool in our basements, and my dad, he and his business partner had an insurance and real estate business that, in fact, I have two brothers working at today, and my dad's business partner's son is there, and they bought the business. But grew up connected around ag. I would say my connection with ag, and we've run a couple foundations having to do with the agriculture industry, and my connection is really being that person that comes from a small town and understands and respects and knows how important agriculture is, how important it is to our state, how important it is to our communities, and just that overall connecting point with our food cycle. And we all can connect with food, and we connect with how it shows up in our lives and the nutritious part of it, but also just how it impacts, our lives and the economy of the state around us. And so when I worked at the Governor's Office of Economic Development for the state, was connected to a lot of ag development related projects and got to know those in leadership in that ag space. And then having done the number of startups, both for profit and not for profit, when they were looking to start the South Dakota Ag Foundation, good friend of mine, Lucas Lynch, was the Secretary of Ag, and he knew I was in that space doing that kind of work, helping organizations get up and get going. And so he gave me a shout. And we've been lucky enough to be alongside of them this last 10 years and go on that exciting journey with them.
And I think through that, the South Dakota agriculture, that's where you've met our mutual friend, Nathan Franzine, who ultimately ended up being kind of the connector to you and Chad Harlander. So the
Yep.
small
Yep.
world just continues.
Absolutely, and he's the fearless leader of the South Dakota Ag Foundation. He's been in that leadership role from a president of the board perspective, and also our mutual friend Nathan Jensen through that organization as well. Just wonderful, terrific people that are so community oriented and really visionary and thinking about not only today, but what does the future look like for agriculture, but just for our state as a whole.
Well, I think that's what's interesting, about Max Strat is you indirectly with your involvement with nonprofits. It's like, yes, you are a for-profit business, but you get to have your hand in all these amazing programs that are there to basically generate revenue for different projects. So talk to me a little bit about Max Strat. When did you start it? And then talk a little bit about what that business is and who you've been involved with.
Yeah, so I started about 10 years ago. I've been lucky enough to be a part of a number of different for-profit startups and on boards and involved in the nonprofit profit space. And I even go back to I grew up with parents that were small business owners in a small town, very active in the community and on boards and part of efforts to grow and expand and build that community. And for that. Piece for me, that really kind of set the tone for the what I had for a vision of my life and where I wanted that to go. And as I went off and got my education and started looking at what was possible for me in my life, and I've told this story, finishing my MBA, which I really had very little work experience at the time, and dreaming about what I wanted to do, two things that really were attractive and interesting to me were I was always interested in that consulting space and how people could come in and help organizations be the best version of themselves. Of course, I didn't know anything at that time. I just was some young kid that thought it sounded adventurous and interesting. But I was interested in that. And I also was interested in nonprofit work, just that idea of the ability to give back, to use your skills and who you are for your best and highest, but to have that be able to give back to your community. And so I had that idea. it then took me 10 years or more to end up really getting into the space. But that was a time when I was building my toolbox, everything from sales skills to management and leadership skills, the startup skills, starting and learning and understanding financials and accounting and HR and all of those pieces that you're going to need to have. And ultimately, MaxStrat is the result of all of that. It's a result of successes and failures in my career along the way. It's a result of all the different experiences and great people that I got to work with. And when I started MaxStrat, I really just wanted to be able to take my positive energy and attitude, my vision for doing good in the world while also doing well, and then also just that kind of startup strategic planning, uh, uh, big thinking, but also willing to take out the garbage and take action kind of approach to the work that I was doing. While also, I've always had a vision for having I don't look at life and work at my life outside of work and my work life. We need to have a good balance, but I want that to be really in sync with each other, and in fact, in the best ways possible, flow together and have my work give me energy for my home life, and my home life give me energy for work. And so for me, it's an emotional and spiritual journey as well with all of it. And I think they need to connect to really have that full and complete life. And so MaxStrat's really a version of that. And what MaxStrat does is we're a management and consulting firm. We manage multiple nonprofits, so we'll come in, and a lot of the nonprofits we work with, they're in a startup turnaround, change, new direction coming with them, want to take a different approach towards what they're doing. Maybe they're just having workforce challenges and are trying to find the right leaders and the right people to help them build and grow, and for whatever reason they're having challenges with that. But they bring us on really as a leadership team. And one big thing that we like to talk to everyone about is we are a team. We think that many times one person gets asked to be that two-headed purple unicorn that can stand on its head. And we just know that's not a reality for anybody in the nonprofit or the for-profit space. And we're all trying to do 12 to 15 different things, and we're really good at probably a quarter to a third of those. We're okay at another third to half of those, and then the other parts, we know that it's a limitation for us, and I myself know those things as well. And so we always try to bring in an executive leadership team instead of just an executive director or just a leader in one space, because we think that just gives the most value to our clients and the groups that we work with. And then beyond that, we do more traditional organizational assessments, strategic planning, strategic assessments, help with specific project launch and project management kind of work, some fundraising work alongside of all of that, marketing and communication stuff. Really coming in and what we like to say is we're the nonprofit board or the nonprofit leader or leadership team's best friend. And we're willing to come in and fill those gaps where they're having to, again, wear those 12 to 15 hats and stand on their head trying to do it.
So you told me on this, the first conversation we had, you started this business with you and basically a backpack.
Me in a backpack. Absolutely. Yeah. Um, for me, again, coming from that startup space, kind of being in a lead startup space, I recognize, I'll have office space and I'll build that out as I need it. But ultimately, what they're hiring is me and my expertise and what I can bring to the table for them. It was a lot of the clients want you to be on site, and if you're not on site, they don't care where you're sitting anyways. And so yeah, it was an ability to get started lean and mean and build and grow from there.
It's always fascinating when you hear someone start their business and like, what do you do on day one? Do you know what you want? There's a vision there, and you're like, okay, today I started. So I mean, obviously you had some hard days.
Yeah,
as all
for
businesses
sure.
did. Wouldn't you even say what you've did starting that and then growing it to what it is today, even that process has made you so good at what you're doing today because you've lived it.
100%. 100%. And that, that's part of it of, whenever I'm working, our organization is working with someone, we can always go back to lived experiences that we've been through where something didn't work, or, I like to speak to the failures of what you learn the most from, and hopefully those failures help someone else not have to go through that. And so, absolutely. And I think that's the beauty of this work we get to do, is it's something that we're going through ourselves every day.
So when you started this up, at that time were you married?
Yes, yep. Married at the time, I would have had 2 kids. Yep, two, almost 3.
So Molly, was she on board at that time, or was
Oh,
she
100.
kind of looking
Yeah.
sideways, going, "What's going
Oh,
on?"
no, she was absolutely, she's been on this journey with me. She has said to me many times, hard for me to just do the easy thing. And so I seem to hunt out and search out, what's that challenge that I can embrace. And I really am always searching for what's the most meaningful, impactful work that I can do, and what's going to challenge me to be the best human that I can be. And really, Max Strat really came from me sitting down and advice from her, as well as a good friend of mine that said, make a list of what you're really good at, make a list of the things that you love to do and you want to do. Look at a cross reference of those and see how those pieces kind of fit in, and then go talk to the 10 to 20 people that want to help you make that happen and care about your future and the kind of person you want to be. And that was the start of it. And honestly, it's been an amazing ride ever since. And I've been able to honestly stay really true to what was in the, what was on those lists initially. And of course, the great people that have come in around me have helped expand that as far as the services and who we help and how we do what we do. But I've been able to stay very true to that over these last 10 years.
Well, and I think that a majority of the folks that get in foundations do some sort of, uh, I don't want to say you're out on their handshaking and asking for money, but I mean that's truly what foundations is
Yeah.
raise money for a
Yeah.
cause.
Yep.
And typically the people that do that are your community leaders, folks that are in business, have had some success, are well connected. And I think that's what leads to it when we had this conversation about all the mutual connections.
Yeah.
You're at such a level of connection throughout the state because of all those things that you did. And I noticed on your website, right in my backyard, the Beersford Watchdog Foundation,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
on your site. So I'm like, wow, he's even been right in my own community helping this out. And so that's just
Absolutely.
so neat. When I saw that, I'm like, oh my gosh.
Well, I think everything that we do goes back to our relationships and our connection with people. As humans, we're wired for connection. And I'm somebody who has, I was asked once, "What's your superpower?" And I think that's a great question for people to be asked and to think about themselves. And ultimately, for me, it's kind of my positivity and my interest in connecting with people. And you never know where those relationships are going to lead. I think if you just start with the mindset of getting to know somebody and knowing that there's possibility in that connection, I've just been really blessed to have amazing people come into my life. I always tell people, if you grew up in a small town, and especially if you grew up off an interstate in South Dakota, if you went to a college that was within the state, and you like people, it's not too hard to have 1 or 2 degrees of Kevin Bacon in your life when you're living every day.
Right. So true. The state allows you to know a lot of people
Uh-huh.
from different
Uh-huh.
corners of the state really fast.
A big
But
small town if you want it to be.
that's right. That's what makes it great.
Yeah.
So this is this is the topic. You've told this story
Yeah.
100 times. I've never heard it. So and it has it's got a few years on it now, and
Yeah,
sometimes stories like this will start to dwindle, maybe is the word,
sure.
but it's a story that I think is really good to share. One, it's going to talk about some resiliency, but on the same token, it's a prevalent deal that's out there. And I think that there's information to be gained, but it's also just an interesting story because you've lived through something. And but to my understanding, it was Valentine's Day on 2019, but a few days leading up to this is kind of when this story began. And so you've told the story enough times. I'll turn it over to you and let you
Yeah.
kind of start from the beginning, and I'll have 100 questions as well. But go ahead. I wish we encapsulated some of this so well in the last conversation, and we didn't even like get into it. So I'm super
Yeah.
excited to hear
Yeah.
about this because
Yeah.
it literally is fascinating.
Well, a little more than 5 years ago, Valentine's Day of 2019, you said, and as you said, a week or maybe a little bit before is when it all started to happen. Honestly, it's like anybody in life. Curveballs happen, right? People get diagnosed with cancer, they have a car accident, they have, that there's all. And I found this later, the number of ways that people have traumatic things that come into their life is innumerous, and you just can't know. And it's like a phrase that I've heard many times along the way. Life isn't about what happens to you; it's how you react to what happens to you. And so I had a week to 2 weeks before the for that Valentine's Day, started experiencing some tingling in my feet. I, at that point, just really thought it was kind of cold. It was February. It's that time of year in South Dakota. Just like couldn't quite warm up. Feeling a little off. Was at that point, and I guess I still am. I not as well playing city league basketball and definitely active, and had a couple of moments where I maybe felt a little more uncoordinated than usual. And these things just kind of growing a little bit, and was trying to figure it out, and just felt a little off, but not enough. I thought maybe I just was coming down with something, or just a little off. um, it started coming to a head when I started to not be able to sleep very well. I started to have a lot of pain in my back, and just a lot of discomfort there. Ultimately culminate, and it was a busy time. I had a couple new client things starting. You know how that is in your work world. You're just trying to fight through to get past something, and then you'll figure it out. Well, I had a big.
I don't have time to be sick.
Yeah, yep, exactly. I had a big strategic planning thing that was coming up that I was getting ready for, and just wanted to get through that with the group that I was meeting with. And the morning of that planning session, I was unloading stuff out of my car, kind of the big flip charts and pens and all the materials I put together for the meeting. And it was a cold, windy day up on a bluff here in central South Dakota, and I closed the door to my vehicle, and the wind kind of whipped through, and and when the wind hit my leg, it literally felt like someone had splashed a whole big bucket of cold water on my leg. And it was a sensation I'd never felt before. And just all felt connected in some way, but didn't know how. But that was the moment it hit me. I was like, I got to call somebody. I got to do something. Well, like most people in my situation, did I go and do that right away and skip a strategic planning session? No, I went through the whole day. We we got it done, and finished up that day. And I immediately called, and again, blessed to have people in your life. A couple medical practitioners that were friends of mine. One of them a physical medicine and rehab doc, who specializes in pain stuff, and started to tell him the weird stuff that was going on. And at this point, I'd already been fear dreaming about, God, do I have some sort of tumor that's causing, pinching something and causing this weird pain, or these things that are happening, or is it cancer? You do all those things in your head. I was trying to connect those dots. And when I talked to that person, he's like, look, you got to come in right away tomorrow morning. None of those things seem to connect the dots. Let's sit down and try to figure it out. And I said, okay, he'll figure it out. We'll go see him. And so the next morning, I went in. He started testing and checking out what was going on with me, and did a test that totally threw me off, where he was checking the strength of my shoulders and their ability to hold up. And he pushed on one side of them, and it just like totally dropped down. And flabbergasted me. I didn't even realize that was something that was going on either. And all that just got the wheels turning. And I spent the whole day getting tests, CT scans and the whole 9 yards, and kept feeling worse and worse that day. It really started to progress that day, that by the time that evening, he had me go into the ER and have a spinal tap done to test some fluids, which ultimately is what tells you what I was diagnosed with, which at that point it hadn't progressed far enough where the signs that show it were in there. So they actually sent me home and thought, you just got a virus, just go, sleep it off and get some fluids and take care of yourself. But I went to go home and tried to walk into my in-laws' house, who were watching our kids. And at that point, was so unsteady that I just told my wife, we got to go back to the hospital. And they checked me in that night. And the next morning, woke up and they had diagnosed me with Guillain-Barre Syndrome, which is a rare autoimmune disease, impacts 1 in 100 to 125,000 people, I think, a year in the United States. It's attacks your peripheral nervous system, and so your immune system gets confused and starts slowly eating away at your nervous system, and so it basically eats away at the protective covering of your nerves in your peripheral nervous system, which basically they then can't transmit the signals that are coming from your brain. And so they immediately flew me to Sioux Falls. There's a process they take you through. They do some IVIG, intravenous immunoglobulins. I think I said that right. Treatments, a number of those, and they'll possibly do plasmapheresis. And really, they're trying to shock your system back into not being confused and resetting the system. Got checked into Avera, and long story short, it took me about 3 or 4 days to have the syndrome progress to the point that they try to stop it before it gets to the core of your body, simply because they don't want it to get to your diaphragm. It's amazing what's run by your nervous system and your body's muscles' ability to keep your body functioning. And for me, it just couldn't be stopped. Everybody's experience with GBS is different. And mine progressed to that point. They had to rush me to the ICU. My wife had to watch my eyes roll back in my head and them rush in and have to rush me down to the ICU. And then from that point, it just continued. I ultimately got to the point where I couldn't even blink for myself, and my family members had to take turns blinking for me. I coded a couple times in the process through all of it, and literally delved into the proverbial valley of death, where I was a shell of myself. Through that whole process, lost 60 pounds over the next 4 to 6 weeks that I was in the ICU and neuroacute in Sioux Falls. All ability to move on my own, and my family, my wife, everyone had to watch it. And ultimately, you just got to ride the wave of it happening. And like I said, everyone's different, and they hope they turn it around before it hits that critical point in the core of your body. But it just is what it is, and they have to manage you, and they have to manage the pain, and they have to manage all the steps in that process and keep your system going.
So, got a question. In this process, now, I saw pictures. Your eyes, and your wife had described it. When you can't blink, your eyes aren't set like the way they are now. They're relaxed. They are like wide. They're like gaping open, aren't they?
Yeah, absolutely.
So now they're taking turns, like maybe closing your eyes. I imagine they're drying out. Are you in a brain space that is there some normality going on between the ears? You can hear and comprehend, and everything that's going on, but you can't move anything.
Yeah.
You can't speak.
Nope. I was on a ventilator through the worst of those times. Now they eventually put a trach in for you, but you don't have the ability to speak when they do that. I used a laser pointer connected to my glasses and a letter chart that my family would hold up in front of me, and I would point to the letters to spell out the words of what I needed. Obviously, they would be talking to me, and I got pretty good at that laser pointer. The problem becomes when you start having those things not work for you. Your eyes are run by muscles as well and nerves, so their strength and their ability to do what they do and focus together, and so started to have struggles with that, but you find a way, and these health professionals that are with you are creative about how they find solutions for it. I would say I was mentally with it, but at a certain point, there's a combination of drug-induced delirium, painkillers, ICU and hospital delirium, and then ultimately just the paralysis and the different state that you're in. What I tell people is the crazy part about the journey is I was so with it. I remember so many moments so clearly. And then your dream world and your dream state, because your reality is so shifted, also becomes very real. And I have some crazy stories around all of that, of what I thought really happened to me in that process. And when I finally there was about a 4 to 6 week period that I was in and out of all of it, where I truly remember very real things that happened that, I'm confirming with family members and friends afterwards that actually happened, but I was actually mentally in a different place and envisioning them, coming to visit me. I thought I was on a train traveling from Minneapolis to Omaha, and they came to visit me in the hospital in Sioux Falls, and they literally walked onto the train car with me. So it was quite such a wild experience where I was really with it much of the time, but I was also totally out of it much of the time.
Wow. You're in this state, you say 4 to 6 weeks, where it's like you're basically like all over the place.
Yeah.
What's the process between you're going into this paralysis? As you mentioned, you can't move, and your muscles then basically just, they're not being worked. So so first question, at some point here, are they very concerned for, I mean, are they thinking at some point here that one, is your life at stake completely? And number two, I'm sure there's fear that you may never come back into a normal state.
Yeah.
And then number three, what is the process? Can you get back to normal, and how long is that process? And maybe like,
Yep.
where do you fit in?
So all of those things were really going on. So when the doctor who diagnosed me, an internal med doctor here in Pierre at the Avera St. Mary's Hospital, a couple amazing things happened in that moment in general. He told me afterwards, actually after I came home, so this would have been a year and a half later, that 30 years ago, I probably would have died from how bad I got. Just what it takes to keep the body alive and all the pieces and steps in it, even to the point of could have gotten care flighted to Sioux Falls in the same way and had all of the procedures that they use now to keep somebody alive. So that really hit me in a different way when you shared that. But two, in that moment, he didn't tell me in that moment, and that's a key part of this. So when he told me initially, he said, 90 to 95% of people who get Guillain-Barre syndrome, and again, I said earlier, you don't know how yours is going to progress. So mine could have progressed up, to my knees and started going backwards, and so I then wouldn't have had the months and months in hospitals. My breathing would have been compromised. It would have been a total different process. But he shared that with me, and of course, in my head, I was like, you know what? 90 to 95% of people get back there. I'm always in those numbers. I'm not going to be in that 5 to 10%. I just gotta work through this. This is something that happened to me, and I'm just going to have to walk this path. The other thing that happened in that moment is after he shared that and kind of shared the plans and the next steps with us, he walked out of the room, and my wife and I were in the room together, and she walked right back and looked right at me. And she and I have kind of disagreed on exactly what she said or had a different recollection of it, but some version of, she said to me, this is going to be the best thing that's ever happened to us, or we're going to be the best people we ever could be because of this experience together. And I'm either super coachable or impressionable. And the second she said that as well, I was like, all right, this is our journey to go on, and this is going to be our story to tell. This is going to be the mountain that we're going to climb, and we're going to do this in the best way possible, and just embrace whatever it is that comes our way. And that fed me. Honestly, it was a huge part of, we talk about with our organizations, of thinking big and having a big vision of what you want. And that just got me set on. And I joked a lot about when I was in that delusional state. I had a lot of delusions of grandeur and big things that I had envisioned myself doing and was asked to do, and great adventures I went on that some of them I thought were real, actually. But I had this kind of hero thing, and this big thing that I was doing in that process, and that along the way stuck with me of having a big vision of what I wanted to achieve out of this, and where I wanted to be at the end of it. I also just had that set of persistence set in my mind, and patience of 90 to 95% of people get to the other side of this, and all they got to do is get through it. And so you just got to survive, and you got to battle through it and figure out a way forward. So what I didn't know is I was going to get the worst version of this, and all of a sudden your percentage and likelihood of recovering and getting back to the life you had lived before, those percentages flip. And thankfully, no one ever took my hope away. And there was a lot of reality they had to share. And those healthcare professionals that help you along, they know you got to take baby steps, but they know they can't take your big vision and hope away. They never took that away from me. There were a couple moments of them knowing some baby steps I had to take where I maybe wasn't quite ready to succumb to that moment, and lower my eyes from the horizon, if you will, of where I wanted to end up. The really hard part is my wife on the other side of it had to deal with some really harsh realities of what might be the possibility. And there were a lot of points when they didn't think I would get back out of a wheelchair. So the next step from Avera was going to a rehab hospital in Lincoln, Nebraska, called the Madonna Rehab Hospital, and they really specialize in traumatic events, severe illnesses, traumatic brain injuries, accidents that leave people paralyzed, and helping them back through that rehab process. And you're in acute care initially, and that process is their number one goal is getting you off your ventilator that you're on, because if you can't do that, you can't do the rest of the things that you want to achieve. And there's just so many baby steps. Like we said, I couldn't move a thing for myself. They were doing rehab on me before I even knew rehab was happening. Range of motion things, and just starting my body to remember those things, and to get those muscles and everything moving again. But there were, moments along the way in that process, like I said, that, and you just don't know where it's going to end. And they try not to take that big horizon away, but it's a long, slow, I mean, I literally started from, I had to learn how to, how to swallow and how to speak again and how to, how to roll over and just do the basic, and you just don't understand how complex the human body is. And when you start from scratch, the building blocks that lead out to to be able to do what we do every day, it's just it's an awesome process. I mean, you could say it's overwhelming, and you could say it was daunting, but to look back and all that I learned from it, the big word proprioception that I didn't even know existed before I went through this process, and really figure out understanding what does your body's awareness in space mean, and I also like to share the recovery process is really, it's like a three-legged stool. The three legs are, one, you have to have the nerves get regenerated. So if that doesn't happen, the signals don't have a place to land. So they have to, your body's got to be rewired. And so if you think about all the wiring being stripped and it can't receive a signal or have a signal go through it, it's got to rewire. And so that's millimeters per day kind of thing. And so that has to happen. And sometimes it takes leaps and bounds and goes quicker, and you might not be as damaged in certain parts of your body. So it's, it accelerates forward in places, but you've got to have the body rewired. Then you have to connect the Wi-Fi to the device. So the wiring is going to the devices, and it's like riding a bike. I mean, I think that's a good analogy of, it's not that you forget how to do those things, because today I don't think about them again. I'm just riding the bike again. But how the Wi-Fi connects to the device, the brain to the body, is a total relearning process. Like, you don't just because your body did it automatically before. You don't. A good example is learning how to sit up again, and knowing that the back and the abs and all of those muscles, how they work in this just finely tuned way that you're not even thinking about as you're sitting there. When you don't have that automatically happening, trying to think about and do it is a whole different process. A good example was learning how to walk again. They have all these different ways they do it, and you go into rehab pools, and they actually have a robotic machine that they put you in, and it walks for you, and is literally, and they're slowly taking away its support for you, and you're doing more on your own, and it's reteaching you how to strike your heel, and reteaching your legs how to move in the motion and the timing in the way that they're supposed to. But there's one part where they put you in this basically giant sling that's like a tripod on wheels, and it lifts you up just high enough so you can feel what it feels like to have your body move. And they literally are putting straps on your legs like puppet strings, and they're yelling directions at you of, strike your heel, clench your butt, and clench your quad. Now on your other leg, clench your hamstring, and it's all like continually happening to you. And it just was such a moment of, all of this is happening, and how am I ever going to figure out how to do this again? Because we don't think about it every day. And it was just process like that, and just continuing to remind your body. So those are the two legs. The final one is getting strong enough, and that's the real hard part of getting as bad as I got, is that you lose so much. You don't lose any of the extra fat you're hoping to take out of the midsection or anywhere else in your body. It's all muscle mass. It is that hospital atrophy, but at an accelerated pace, because you can't move a single muscle. You don't even have the micro little movements moving around. So all of those places in your body have that decreased function. And if you're not, you might have the first two steps going, but if you're not strong enough to do it, it's hard to know if I'm not getting that movement back, because my nerves aren't regenerating because the connection's not happening. You know, it might just be that you're just not strong enough and you just got to keep working at it. And that's just the dance. And the Madonna Rehab Hospital, other places like it around the country, and there's not that many, they're just magical in what they do and how they help people through that process, and how they support people and how they know the plan and the process that has to happen to make that a reality.
So you not only did you get back on your feet, learn how to walk, Chris Maxwell takes it to the next level, and it inspired you to do a challenge.
Yeah, well, you know, first of all, when we got home, you know, COVID hit within a 4 or 5 month time frame, and so everything kind of shut down. And you know, luckily, my family was already pretty prepared for upheaval, and my business was, and all of it. And so not that we didn't have our own challenges or process we went through, but we certainly were used to not having a regular routine. But a year after that, in 2021, as I was starting to get better and better at my strength and my ability to move, and just kind of restarting that process. We joked that it was kind of my victory lap, the challenge that I wanted to take on. I hadn't really ran much. I hadn't been super active. I'd been doing basic, physical therapy stuff and getting back to basic movement kind of stuff. But knew I wanted to start running, knew I wanted to play City League basketball again. That was a vision and a dream and goal of mine. And so I wanted to set some big goals out there for myself. And so my wife got me a Peloton, and I hopped on there and started working and growing and getting stronger and building that up. But I knew I had to start running. And so I set a goal of wanting to run I ultimately said I wanted to run a marathon. I only got to a half marathon. My goal is to run a half marathon, and I did it back in Lincoln, where the Madonna Rehab Hospital was. And we called this tour my victory lap, I guess, if you will. And so that was my first goal. I went and did that. That was the first time I was able to get back to the Madonna Rehab Hospital, and just was so wonderful to see those people. It's amazing how lucky I am to have the fond memories that I do of that really challenging place that I was in. But it really is a special place for me. And so I did that. And then as part of my recovery, I also spent a couple months in Omaha, Nebraska at Quality Living Inc., QLI. And so as another part of my victory lap, went down there and I did a triathlon there later that year. And so was able to swim, bike, and run, and complete that as well. And I had done a couple of triathlons before that, and loved biking. The running had gone well, and have been a swimmer in the past. And so that year, that was the victory lap of coming back, at least physically, the journey back.
What was the when you went back to the Madonna, is what you said, when you were back there, did they know that you were going to run this half marathon?
Yeah, we ended up connecting with them. And I've stayed in touch with a number of people from there, and have been back a couple of times. But they knew I was coming back. We couldn't actually go inside at that point, because they still were pretty locked down and had quite a bit of restrictions. But I was able to have, during this process as well, my wife had wrote a book about our experience. The book's called The Other Side of Us. You can find it out on Amazon. It's the story from a caretaker's perspective. She's definitely the writer and creative of the duo that we are. Amazing story that she was able to tell, and from a perspective that many people don't get, that perspective of the person who's to the back and the right or left of the wheelchair, that's really carrying the weight of the world. And it's not just for something like I went through. It's somebody who's dealing with any kind of, geez, I got to fly that.
You got to fly this in love with you.
I know. and so she had just finished that book, and we had just launched it, and so we had a book signing party at a local bookshop there, and so that's when the health professionals that had worked with me, they all were able to come down, and we were able to get together and see him, and a number of them were at the race, and alongside the journey, cheering me on alongside of the path, and it was really an amazing experience.
What's the so give us the name of the book again?
The Other Side of Us.
Yeah, and it's Molly.
It's Molly Weisgram, Weisgram.
All right. Well, I'm gonna get myself a copy, and then I want her to sign it. But
well, we can definitely do that. And I tell people it really is as much a story about family and relationships and having a really challenging, traumatic thing that happens. And it doesn't just have to be something like mine that you get taken away and you're in a hospital and go through that process. I mean, there's people every day that silently are working through family and health and life challenges, and they're in that caretaker role, and it's as much about mental health and the relationship emotional journey as it is an episode of House MD or ER or whatever that is. It really is about that journey that we went through together, we went through with our kids, and navigating that in a real honest way.
And we had spoke about that. I have someone in my office. You heard his name before through some circles, and I confirmed. He agreed that you two had this mutual friends.
Yeah.
Going through a very similar process. Hasn't been able to get all the way back to full recovery, but definitely a book that I'd like him to read and his wife, because I think there's so much parallel to it, and so I think that would be helpful for them and so many other people out there that are, like you said, dealing with something like this. This would be a book that would probably give them the feeling of, okay, I'm not the only one going through this.
Yeah, well, and I mean, here's the reality of it all is that we're all. It's a lot of times people don't feel like they have the permission to feel what they feel in the moment, and most of us, almost everyone, doesn't understand the feelings that they're stuffing down inside of them when they're in that fight or flight mode. And I'll give a good example of, we were home for probably a year and a half, maybe 2 years, and my wife turned to me and said, I haven't cried since you got sick. And she said it to me, and it got my wheels turning immediately, and I realized myself that I hadn't either. And what's interesting is you get stuck in this fight or flight mode, and for her, she was mad, and she, in every moment when something would hit her emotionally, she'd just get that fight mode on, and you get stuck in that mode because you're so stuck in it so long that she wouldn't let herself let that out. For me, I was going back to my superpower. I was positive. I was just going to be positive. We're going to work our way through it. And I would stuff it back down, and I would stay positive. And that's the thing I would tell anybody as well of, we're still on a recovery journey, emotionally, relationship wise, mental health wise, with all of it. And that's probably the physical thing was a big thing to overcome. But it really, for anyone, it just brings everything in your life to this acute point. And we see it as a blessing of, we got to wrestle with maybe some of those things that we weren't wrestling with before. We got challenged on our worldview and how we live and how we approach everything every day. And we use the phrase everything is for you, everything is for us at Max Strat, the work that we do. And again, we don't get to control what happens to us. It's how you react. And there's been a lot of learnings along the way on that front.
2% better every day, right?
Yeah. Thank you, Steve Larson. 2 degrees of change.
The growth coach.
Yeah.
So let's talk about today. So you do a podcast. Obviously, we talked about that in the beginning. You teamed up with somebody that I've come across in my past in Fargo. I doubt he remembers the meeting himself. It wasn't all that formal, but Patrick Kirby, a lot of correlations between what you do and he does in Fargo, and somehow, how did you two connect?
Yeah, well, we actually connected at South Dakota Nonprofit Network annual conference, and at that point, we were leading that organization and put that conference on. And he was the keynote speaker, and he and I met. We started talking, we connected. We had a similar energy level and worldview, and the clients we're working with were so similar, and the way we do our work and how we like to help people get a big vision for what they do, but actually like to stick around and be there when as I like to say, like Mike Tyson has said, everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the face. That's often that way with clients. You can put a big, nice plan together, but you're going to go out into the world and you're going to get punched in the nose. And the question is going to be, how do you react to that? And I want to be there. Patrick wants to be there. We want to be along that journey so we can figure out how we stand back up and stay in the fight. And so we just had a lot of things that connected there. Patrick has done his Do Good Better podcast. He's done 350 plus episodes. He's been doing it for a long time. But as we connected, as we started doing work together, at this point when we're recording this, we've recorded some of our first podcasts, but we haven't officially launched it into the universe yet, and so we're still kind of prepping and getting all initial things together. But he was hitting a point where he wanted to pivot and kind of do some different things with the podcast, and I had thought about and had looked at doing some podcasts, maybe some around my health stuff. My wife and I had looked at doing it. I'd always had some visions for what I wanted to do from a work perspective, with kind of the way that we approach our work and kind of the life and approach in general that drove the start of MaxStrat. And so Patrick and I joined forces, and it'll be the Do Good to the Max podcast, and wanting to, we work in the nonprofit space, but wanting to talk to just a lot of different leaders and a lot of different individuals in the world about how we do good to the max. How do we do the best and the most amount of good that we can, and how do we support leaders in knowing that there's others out there that are going through this, others that you might look at that you don't think have the same challenges and struggles that you do, that do have them, others you can learn from. Others that are just like you, that maybe make it okay to feel just like you feel, and so we're just hopeful that we can have those meaningful conversations and also have a ton of fun and bring some positivity to everyone as we're going on this adventure together.
I'm excited. I've seen some of the stuff that Patrick did. I was aware of, like I said, who he was when I was in Fargo. I'm excited to see you two collaborate. I think that this is going to be an amazing thing. I agree with you 100%. Your energy levels, your positivity. Quite frankly, I don't know Patrick's story, but your resilience with the stuff that you've been through, it's outstanding. And so this was a major focus on why I wanted to bring you on. The story is incredible, but man, the way that you just stay positive and get yourself through it, it reminds me of the story with Nick in our office, where it's your brain that keeps you going, and whatever you believe in as far as your spirit or whatever higher power. As long as you don't give up the hope and you continue to believe that that's going to happen, I think good things will always end up being the result.
Well, I believe you got to believe in something bigger than yourself, whatever that is. For me, I grew up a small town Catholic kid, and are still active in our Catholic church here locally. I would say I've got a spirituality that's beyond just that box, and I've explored all different directions with it. And no matter what, no matter who you are, you got to believe in something bigger in yourself, and that can be nature and the universe. It can be whatever that is for you, but you got to have that out there, and then ultimately that resilience. I was given the phrase and quote from a good friend of mine, and actually she asked me the question of, and it was in a spiritual sense, and we were talking about the Bible verse, the yea though we walk through the valley of death, fear no evil, for thou art with me. And she had kind of read it off to me, and she asked me what's the most important part of that verse. And I thought about it. I forget what I even said back to her, and she said walk. And the key is, when you're in the valley of death, you can't sit down, you can't pitch a tent, you can't move in and call that your apartment. The key is to just keep walking. In fact, my wife and I said that to each other over and over when I was going through this process of you just keep, and I wasn't walking at the time for most of it, but just keep moving forward. And we actually talk at Max Strat a lot about positive proactive action, no matter what the situation, because it could be a really negative situation, and it doesn't mean you have to be super positive about what's going on, but the point is to try to build and keep momentum wherever you can. And sometimes it's just losing the least amount of momentum possible in the moment, and finding maybe where you did have success in the day when maybe there was a failure someplace else, and all of that. Because I got a lot of bad days, and I got a lot of times where I'm disappointed or have a setback, and I'm not just. And I think that was a big learning for me. I maybe was a little duckies and bunnies earlier in my life, and maybe not as realistic at times. And I think I've evolved from some of that. I think I'm very realistic with things, but I also am not giving up and very resilient. And so I'm going to find the most positive thing I can find out of things. Every moment that happens because it's supposed to happen. Every person that comes into your life, every situation. And sometimes it's not exactly what you wanted to happen, but I believe it's what you needed to happen. And you either get to learn from that situation and grow, or you can fight against it. You can flow with the river of life and just try to not run into shore and run into the rocks, or you can try to paddle upstream. And I just learned more and more that if you flow with the river of life and you put out good and put out as much positive as you can, it's going to come back to you with that law of circulation.
Well, this story is certainly a perspective changer, I think, in a lot of different ways. One, what you had just said kind of encapsulates all of that, and two, when you think about perspective, what all the little things that sometimes can distract us and get us down.
Yeah.
When you put yourself in your shoes in that moment, and your wife's shoes, and your wife's and kids' shoes, sorry, for 4 to 6 weeks there, where it's probably a little touch and go, all the small things don't matter anymore. That, over time, as the further you get away from this, some of those things leak naturally back into our lives. But
Yeah.
man, you ultimately, it's like, let's focus on the big things. Those small things just don't mean that much anymore, do
Well,
they?
and you hit on a really key point there. Have talked a lot about my experience and my wife's experience in this process, and that's why part of the coming back together and the process of coming home can create such challenges. Is when you go through those experiences. She and I both had a really traumatic thing happen in our lives, and we had almost exact opposite experiences. I was able to be so fully in the moment, and because of my wife, because of my kids, the rest of my family, my friends, my community, how they all showed up for me. I was able to be so centered and focused in that place. I didn't have any of the outside distractions. I didn't have any of the worries of what was falling apart. It just they held me up and lifted me up and allowed me to be so centered and focused on what I was trying to do there. I've told people, when I go back to Madonna Rehab Hospital, it's like a spiritual experience for me. I can feel the calm come on me when I'm close to that place, and it's so special that I was able to have that because of all the people and things that were around me at the time. My wife, on the other hand, had to try to get her arms around everything. She had to try to control. I had to let go and surrender completely, and she had to try to figure out how to get control and how to get her arms around all of it, and had to worry about every little detail, not just for me, or not just for her, but for me and for all of the things. And she, I mean, what an amazing woman, and how she did that. We have talked and laughed and joked about how I was the one that was supposed to go through my experience, and she was the one that was supposed to go through hers, because I don't know what would have happened to our family if I was the one trying to have to get my arms around all of it and control all of it and put the structure around it. But there is just something to all of that, and the final piece I would just say is you don't get to magically create a belief system or a toolbox of things that are going to show up for you when that traumatic moment happens. You show up with what you got. And I would just say, work on yourself and be working on those habits that are going to have you prepared for that moment when it happens, because you don't get to create a faith and a belief system when you're in the middle of all of that. You're in fight or flight mode and you're using what you got and what you've been relying on. And I was lucky to have an amazing partner with me on my journey before it happened, and lucky to still have her with me going forward from here. And it's again, you show up with what you got. So work on it today so you don't have to try to find it when you're in your worst moment.
Well, I'm glad that you got through it, though. I think the world's a better place for having Chris Maxwell walk around on this rock that we have. And I got to tell you, once again, great conversation here. I'm so glad. I'll sheepishly tell you, as soon as we had our first conversation, I called Chad Harlander that afternoon, and I said, "Man, I got to tell you, that was one of the best connections I've ever had in my life." I said, what a great dude. And so he was so happy and proud that he said, "Hey, Boom, after you meet up with Chris, when you become a superstar, just remember the little guys out here. Just remember."
Exactly. kind of you to say, and it's, my pleasure to be here, and if my journey or my story can be helpful to anyone, we had a ton of people that showed up for us, people who'd been through exactly what we've been through or through similar things, that showed up in ways that weren't connected in any way to my health piece and just were supporting us in life. And I think that's what it's all about, is being able to show up for each other and share those. Hopefully it's a little easier for somebody else as they go down that path.
Well, what can we do? Obviously you've got your Max Strat. For those listening out there, is there anything we can do to help Chris Maxwell and Max Strat?
Oh man, well that's nice of you to ask. Reach out and connect with me. I think ultimately, like I said, it's about relationships and connections. And if we can connect, and there's anything we can do to help out yourself personally, if there's anything to help out an organization you're a part of, any connections we can make, that would be the thing someone can do. Is you can check out maxwellstrat.com and check us out on all the socials. Maxwell Strategy, Max Strat, that's out there. And if there's anything we can do to help somebody else, we'd love to. And always happy to talk, always willing to support and help out in whatever way that we can. So you can do that. And anybody that hears, go check out that book and check it out, share it with others. Hopefully it can have, and we've been lucky enough to have it have a really positive impact on a lot of people's lives that have gone through traumatic events, and the more people that it can help and support. And we've, I'll share this. We did have a really and really important part of it for us is that we were going to give back, and so we have given back to the Madonna Rehab Hospital in Avera, and QLI, Quality Living, through all of it. And that's an important part for us. Just all the people who stepped up and supported us. I hope at some point we can give back enough to the world for what's been given to us.
Well, I think there's a lot that you guys offer. I think there's so many ways that you can help people. So I hope they take advantage of the resource that you are. I will post a link to the book, Molly's book, in our YouTube. And speaking of YouTube, if you enjoyed this episode, click that little thumbs up button and subscribe. And please share if you think others would find these episodes helpful as well. Chris, I want to thank you. I appreciate you taking time out of your day to share with me, and thank you for all that you do in the world and your positive energy. It's certainly a light, and you shined it on me, and I'm very happy that you did.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's my pleasure, my honor.